Hello and welcome to today's episode of Created to Write. I have with me the lovely Cathryn. How are you, Kath?
I'm well, thank you. And thank you for having me on the show.
Such a pleasure. So, can you just introduce yourself? Where are you living? And yeah, what do you write?
Sure. So I'm from Australia. I live in Queensland on the beautiful Tamborine Mountain. It's a rainforesty area, and that's why I love it here. I'm in love with trees in general and green stuff. It's a real inspiration for my writing. I homeschool my kids. I've got four kids, although only two of them are at home now. My older two, one is in university, the other one is out in Birdsville doing some jackaroo work, cowboy for people who are in America. Yeah, so that's sort of about where I am at the moment.
Great, awesome. Yeah, out in the outback jackarooing. That sounds like fun.
Yes.
So, tell us, where did your writing journey begin?
Okay. Well, I've always loved reading and writing, right from when I was really little. I memorized Cinderella at age 3, apparently, my mum tells me. And I started writing and illustrating my own stories, basically as soon as I could hold a pencil. Um, but, and all through high school, I even wrote a screenplay. Um, and then, as often happens, uh, because I loved writing so much, I decided to go into engineering because that's what you do when you love writing. So writing went by the wayside for many, many years. It wasn't until I was homeschooling my kids and encouraging their writing, because my daughters are both really good writers. And actually my youngest son's not bad either. Heath was never into writing very much, but particularly my daughters. Always encouraging their writing and editing their stuff. And one day, my when she was 14, my eldest daughter developed a new hyperfixation for Dungeons and Dragons, which is a fantasy role-playing game for those who don't know. And she wanted us to play as a family. And I thought that was a great idea. We were going through a particularly rough patch as a family at the time. So this was a real bright spot. So we started playing the standard starter version that you get. And we're a few months in and she said, Mum, I think I want to write my own campaign for our family to play. I was like, sure, sounds great. So she she went away and she did that. She spent months working on this campaign, working out the villains, like the other characters that we were going to encounter. We created our characters, who we wanted to play. She kept asking me about my character's backstory because that was apparently important to what she was creating. So we started playing the game, and it was just so much fun. I hadn't had that much fun in such a long time, and it was really creating precious memories that I didn't want to lose. So, spur of the moment, I just decided, why don't I chronicle our game so that, I can, I'll print out, a copy for each of us and we can laugh at it later, when we're all old and I have grandkids and stuff and we can still laugh about what happened. And that spur of the moment decision is what got me into writing because the Chronicle started unearthing things in me that I wasn't expecting. Uh, and the I started processing emotions through this story that I had not been able to process before. And it started feeling like a novel. And this was, I don't know, maybe like I'd written 50,000 words or 80,000 words, something like that. And I actually Googled how long is a novel. Um, and we had barely started the campaign and I was up to like, that many words. And so I really started thinking about, do I want do I want to write a novel? Like I didn't. It was that's not what I intended. And uh, especially the idea of publishing was very confronting. I did not like the idea of putting my work out there to be torn to shreds and get one-star reviews from like critics. Like that was terrifying. Um, but at the same time, the stuff that I was writing about seemed bigger than just our family, and it really felt like God was putting it on my heart that this story is more than you think it is. Like it's more than just for you. Other people need to hear this. There are other people who are hurting in the same way that you are hurting, and they need access to this healing that I am giving you through this story process. And so I had lots and lots of long walks with God about, but I don't think I can do it. I don't, and just the other, there were other things that I was conveying and like, and it was like, who am I to do this? Like, I am not an English professor like, Tolkien or Lewis or, how am I supposed to convey this huge thing that you want me to convey? I'm not qualified. I did not study writing. I love writing, but yeah. So eventually, after lots of these long, I kept on handing it over to God every time. Like, so this is your story. Ultimately, I will do what you want, and if you want me to publish, I will take that step and publish. But I want to I want to feel at peace about this, basically. That that this is what you want, and then okay, I'll do it. So that was quite a long process. But then once I'd made the decision, yes, I'm going to be pursuing publication. Then I really just threw myself into it because if I was going to do something, both for myself and for God, I was going to do it as well as I possibly could. Like I was not going to put out something that was half done, and not up to scratch. Because if this story truly was bigger than me, then I needed to give it everything. So yeah, that's sort of how my writing journey started, and how I kind of felt, the call to actually
Amazing.
pursue writing. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And what you said is so true, and which was what I love about story and novels and fiction is that people process their emotions through story, through reading. It can be any kind of story that they resonate with.
Mm.
Absolutely. We need more good stories out there so people can keep their own healing journey going, whether it's through fiction or non-fiction. I love that. And you did mention some of your struggles. Is there any other lies that you've had to overcome?
Yeah, there definitely is. So a big one was feeling that I wasn't a real writer, because mainly because this trilogy that it ended up being a trilogy, not just a novel. Um, like because my eldest daughter Emmeline had come up with the campaign, so she created the villains, the lot of the characters, a lot of the scenarios, and like so in a way, I felt like I was ghostwriting for her. That these weren't my, even though I created my character's backstory and I created my character, like I didn't come up with the original ideas. So, I struggled with thinking of myself as a real writer. I wasn't sure that I could write on my own, like with coming up with the idea and developing it into a full proper story. Uh, that was something that didn't really get resolved in me until I did write my first book, which was much shorter, just a novella. but I was so proud of it because I came up with the idea and, I created it. It was all me. And then so that helped to combat that. It's like, no, my imagination hasn't shriveled up into to nothing. It is still legitimately there in me. I can do this. Even though it's hard, like ideas, like some writers, they say they have so many ideas they don't know what to do with them. It's like I'm the opposite. Like I struggle to get the ideas, but once I've got an idea, I'm just very dogged about pursuing it. And I will get that story down, and I can't help but write it. And I don't like, I fortunate, I guess, don't really suffer from shiny new object syndrome, which I think a lot of really creative writers struggle with, where they have all these ideas. But yeah, and another thing I really struggled with was thinking my successes were flukes and, not repeatable. Like, that was just a fluke. I won't be able to do that again. Like the first short story award that I won, and it was a from a like it was a reasonably big prize, but again, like I thought, oh, that must have just been a fluke. I just hit on something by accident. The judge just happened to like it, and and like same with the trilogy. Like, yeah, this 400,000 word thing, that's just fluke. It seems crazy when I actually say it out loud. It helps to take the teeth out of the lie. But
Yes, definitely. It's a lie. Stop
yeah,
believing it.
yes, yes,
Uh,
yes. Getting outside feedback helped a lot with those. I still suffer a lot from imposter syndrome, but the outside feedback that I've received from people who have no investment in making me feel good about myself, that helps to to combat them as well. And also just remembering how, like, that call that I felt, and yeah, and just how much I love writing anyway. So yeah, even if everything fell apart, I'd still the story still means so much to me. Either way, even if it does turn out to be terrible. But no, it's not terrible now. I've done a lot of work to make sure that my writing is not terrible. Even if it's not perfect.
yeah, and bottom line, you enjoy the journey.
Yes.
Do it for part of the enjoyment,
Yes.
then you have something outside of that. And tell us, Kath, what's your writing process look like?
Yeah. I'm still developing it, but I'm definitely not a plotter. And I'm also not a complete pantser either. I am somewhere in the middle.
And for those who aren't aware of what a pantser is, it's those who write by the seat of their pants.
That's it. So, um, I've discovered that I need two things to start writing. I need a point, like, why am I, where am I going with this? What am I trying to say? And I need a climax. And if I've got those two things, I can usually discover the rest. So I do need I do need a little bit of structure, but uh, a lot gets discovered along the way in the process of writing, and then and rewriting, because rewriting is actually very important to my process. So what I'll do is I'll get the first draft of the story down, and then I will do what I call a reverse outline. So that's when I go back and do the plotting half of the equation. So I don't assume that what I have written is necessarily well structured, although I'm much better at that now. I've got more of a, and I've trained my instincts. So I had instincts to start with, which is helpful. And I think that's what pantsers like people who are really good at pantsing, they have really good instincts of how a story should flow. So then I go back and I see what I've actually written, and I find all the plot beats and I refine the theme and like really nail down the problem that I'm trying to get at in this particular story, and do an awful lot of work around uh, getting the structure, getting the structure right, sort of on paper. And then I go back to the actual words on the page and mold them to fit the the true story, the real story that I ended up uncovering in the discovery process of the writing. It's it's very involved. It's a lot involved, like I said, it's a lot of rewriting. It's a lot of analysis. Um, and I guess for some people it would be too much. Like they just want to get to the end and then not change very much after that. But like I'm always open to a lot of feedback, a lot of cutting and rearranging. So that's that's been a feature of the trilogy, especially, is because it was the first story I ever wrote. So a lot of it had to be, it was like puzzle pieces, and I had to take this big, huge story, cut it up into its individual sections, and with the help of a book coach, rearrange like rearrange certain events so that they would better fit the story I was actually trying to tell. Um, and lots of bits had to get cut, and lots of bits had to be repurposed. I'm a big fan of repurposing scenes if I can, rather than completely cutting them. Um, but the overall result is a cohesive narrative that actually works, that actually just feels really good in my bones of this is the story I wanted to tell. It's giving a clear signal to the reader. It's not all muddled up. The reader doesn't have to do a lot of work to guess what I was trying to get at. Um, but it, but it's also not hitting someone over the head with a hammer of theme, because it's all just subtly woven in, and every scene is tuned to create the movement that it needs to do to make the story well paced and very satisfying by the time you get to the end. So yeah,
Great explanation.
that's my big process.
And I'm sure that's really helpful for people who are just starting out. Now, you mentioned a little bit about feeling called by God in your writing. Can you talk a little bit more about your faith and how it's shaped what you write?
Yeah, because I I wanted this was one of the things that that I spoke to God about when I was working out whether I wanted to publish is who am I writing for? Am I writing for Christians? Am I writing for non-Christians? And I really felt much more drawn to writing for non-Christians. Um, so I wanted my work to be accessible to secular people, but for Christians um, to recognize God embedded in it. So that's what I really tried to do, is really embed God in the world building, uh, much like Tolkien did, um, but also a bit like for the trilogy in particular, because with fantasy, it's easier, it's much easier to bring faith into it than with science fiction. For me anyway, I can, it's like it seems to come in a lot more naturally. So, but I never liked fantasy that, well, there was few books, shall I say, few fantasy books that I was finding where I liked having like a Jesus figure in there that always just seemed a bit unnatural for some reason. So I took a step back and it's like, okay, well, we have a Trinity, and whether or not there is a Jesus figure that has yet come to this world and died for the salvation of it. Um, the Trinity's always and forever true everywhere, no matter what world you're on. And that's what I tried to that's how I tried to think about the world that I built for the trilogy, to kind of do what C.S. Lewis did for is in terms of Aslan, but to do it instead for the Trinity. So I got somewhere along the line, I got this inspiration for my Trinity, which is called the Weaver, and there's three parts to the Weaver, and they all work together just like the Trinity works together. And that is who my main character interacts with. Um, and it's all embedded in the world building and how the world works, and it's sort of parallel to how our actual world works, but in a more visible way. So I'm trying to make sort of how the Trinity manifests through our world parallel the way that the Trinity manifests in my fictional world, but more visible, more concrete. Because I think that's a big strength of the fantasy genre. You can do that. You can take something that is quite abstract and invisible, and you can concretize it so that it's more easily grasped. And that's what I wanted to do in my books. And I did it a little bit in my science fantasy book that I wrote as well. It's much more subtle there. Um, but still, I wanted to work from this idea that God is embedded in every world. And the way they experience that might be a little bit different. They might have different words, different terms, but the experience is kind of the same. The connection is still always there and real and necessary. Like we can't do life apart from God. So yeah, that's sort of yeah,
Oh,
how I felt called to put God in my writing.
sounds amazing. Well done.
Thank you.
Tell us what a highlight so far has been.
I've had many highlights actually. So winning my first award was definitely a highlight. It was very, very unexpected, and I was prepped that I was in the top three, so to be like prepared to read aloud my story if it was the winner. But I didn't really think. I thought, oh well, top three, that's awesome. Maybe I got third. And so third place was read out and wasn't me. And then second place was read out and it wasn't me. And it was I was shaking. I had this I'm sure I had this tremor in my voice when I was like reading my story out aloud because it was over a Zoom thing with other people in Perth, and because that's where the competition was held.
What competition was that?
It was the Fellowship of Australian Writers, Western Australia. So it was, yeah, their writing group hosted the competition. It's now called, it was called the Stewart and Haddo at the time. It now has a different name, but it's the same competition. Yes. So that was definitely a highlight. And my kids will remember like me coming out from the Zoom call and someone was on the, I think someone was on the computer and like, and I just started jumping up and down on the spot. Like I never, I never do that. But I just started jumping up and down on the spot. It's like, I won. I actually won. But yeah, so that would definite highlight there.
Oh,
And something more, there's a couple of other really special highlights too that are they're much more quiet highlights. And one was when I was pitching my story to actually the lady who is now going to be my publisher. Um, and I during the session, she had one of her interns read my sample that I'd sent, and the intern had commented to her that like my writing sounded like Brandon Sanderson, but with a feminine touch. And I'm like, he's like one of my favorite writers. He's very, very famous, and like to be compared in any way to him is something I will never forget because it's not something that it's not something you can ask people to say about you. Like that's so to have it volunteered, that was amazing. Um, but I also have another highlight when I was selling my books for the first time at a market, and a teenage girl that I had just sold, like this was maybe the third book that I sold that day, came running back to the stall and she just said, I just want to tell you, your book is so good. Like, I've just been like sitting down reading it and I just like, I don't want to put it down. I was like, yeah, that was to hear that, like, directly from a reader in your target audience. Like, yeah, there's nothing better than that.
so good. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much for coming on today's show. For everyone who's still watching, please hit that like and subscribe. Go follow Cathryn. I'll put her links below. And before we leave, let us in on one final word for somebody who's just starting out or who's gone stagnant in their writing.
My biggest piece of advice is don't try and do it alone. I tried to write alone for so long, and it wasn't until I let other people in to my writing and I sought outside feedback that I actually started to grow as a writer. Um, and yeah, so that would be first and foremost. Do not try and do this journey alone. You can't. We need each other as writers, and actually, the Fellowship of Writers is incredible. It's the one of the few spheres where we're not competing with each other, where we actually, are each other's biggest cheer squads. And yeah, so reach out. Don't do it alone.
Brilliant advice. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for coming on my show today. It's been such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
And for everybody still watching, you were created to create, and perhaps you were created to write.